Welcome back to another FPL video, this time out of Gameweek 24, and it's going to be the best wildcard team. There's also plenty of content headed your way for UCL Fantasy and FPL. If this video gets to over 200 likes, there's going to be an updated draft for Matchday 7 in UCL Fantasy and the transfer tips for Gameweek 24 in FPL. On top of that, there's going to be the usual team selection videos for both fantasy formats, and the plan is to do live streams despite the fact that I will be away next week. I'm still going to try to get some content out for you in the weeks to come, and there's also going to be much more headed your way throughout the rest of the season. So subscribe to the channel, also follow me on Twitter and Instagram, join the Discord server, the FPL League, and check out the link to Drafthound in the description below. But without further ado, let's jump straight into this video. Goalkeepers have a low ceiling in FPL, and it's been very difficult to nail down the best option. There's usually a standout in every single season, but this time round, there's a lot of goalkeepers scoring a similar number of points. Now, with Dubravka, he's been quite poor in terms of FPL output since he has come into the side, replacing the injured Nick Pope. And I think Newcastle have only kept one clean sheet in that time frame, which was against Fulham, who went down to 10 men very early on in that game. But Newcastle defensively are leaking chance after chance. They conceded 4 to Luton Town, and you just don't know where the clean sheets are going to come from. You could argue Bournemouth at home in a couple of weeks' time in Gameweek 25, but that could be the only clean sheet you get in the next couple of weeks, the way that Newcastle are defending. In Blank Gameweek 26, they have a fixture, but it's against Arsenal away. And then you look at Blank Gameweek 29, and Newcastle are very unlikely to have a fixture because of the FA Cup results. Let's see what happens in the 4th round replays, and of course in the 5th round as well. But Dubravka I'd go for. I think it's just worth going for these cheap options and spending a minimal amount in this position. And the second goalkeeper I'm going for, all dependent on the injury status, is Areola, who isn't yellow flagged right now, but he did come off at half-time. Fabianski replaced him against Manchester United as West Ham lost 3-0. It's Arsenal up next, and West Ham have 0 victories in this calendar year so far, but you would expect them to turn things around fairly soon, especially when the likes of Paqueta come back from injury. Kudus is already back, and I think West Ham will start to get the results that they probably deserve at some stage, but they have been shaky recently, it can't be denied. If you don't want to go for these 2 goalkeepers and you want something different, I think Pickford, Martinez, Alisson and Raya are the other 4 I'd consider. With Alisson, you've got a great fixture in 24, a double in 25, but he does blank in 26, and he's also far more expensive. You could also point towards Ederson, but I'm not a big fan of him because Man City always seem to concede these cheap goals late on, and Ederson doesn't have a high ceiling. He rarely gets bonus points, so really with Ederson, you're limited to 6 points, and he doesn't get that too often in the last season or so. And then you have David Raya, with Arsenal having the best underlying numbers defensively. They rarely concede chances. They also have the lowest XGC, fewest shots conceded, and they still somehow gift goals to the opposition and don't keep as many clean sheets as they probably should. Then the other 2 alternatives, Pickford and Martinez, they're probably not the most reliable defences, but with Martinez and Pickford, they are bonus points magnets and they make a lot of saves, and that's why they can be pretty reliable and up there in terms of FPL points scored amongst goalkeepers. So those are the 6 goalkeepers I consider on the wild card, but in terms of budget and spending the most amount in terms of the outfield players, I would go for 2 cheap options in goal with Dubravka and Areola. Gabriel had a chaotic game in terms of an FPL perspective against Liverpool. He played fairly well, but the own goal was quite unfortunate. It struck off his hand, it went in, and he got -1 points in the end. But he also played a big part in the first 2 goals that Arsenal scored through his long passing, which was very impressive. And I still think Gabriel or Saliba are worth investing in, and if not, you can go for David Raya in goal. But an Arsenal defender is certainly worth going for. They're very likely to feature in Blank Gameweek 29, but that all depends on the Aston Villa versus Chelsea game on Wednesday in the FA Cup. It's the 4th round replay, so if Aston Villa lose, their fixture against West Ham will go ahead in Gameweek 29. But if it's Chelsea losing, and it's very likely that they will, then it will be Chelsea versus Arsenal at the Emirates in Gameweek 29, and that will be a confirmed fixture. So one of those games will definitely go ahead, and it all depends on who progresses through to the 5th round of the FA Cup. I'll keep you up to date on this channel, but I would go for Gabriel. He also has Newcastle at home in Blank Gameweek 26 and Burnley away in Double Gameweek 25, and Arsenal have decent long-term fixtures. They're not great, but I think they're good enough to invest in one defender, and Gabriel is probably the most cost-effective option right now. Saliba was also very shaky against Liverpool. You have to say he was probably the worst of the 2, and he was the main culprit behind the own goal that Gabriel eventually scored. Now, the second defender I'm going for is Estupinian. and he has been benched and subbed off early in the last 2 games, which is very frustrating, but I do expect him to get back into the side. I would not play him at all against Tottenham away, but the fixtures afterwards from game weeks 25 to 28 are good enough to go for one Brighton defender, and Estupiñán is the only one I'd go for. You could argue that Van Heck as a cheap budget enabler is fine, but I think Estupiñán is the only one you want to go for because of bonus points and the assists, the occasional goal here and there, but it's mainly the assists and the bonus points. Clean sheets will be few and far between because Brighton aren't really one of the solid teams in this league, despite Estupiñán keeping 2 clean sheets very recently, and Brighton were looking better from a defensive perspective. So I would go for the Ecuadorian. Let's see if he comes back into the side against Tottenham. If he doesn't, that would be major cause for concern, and maybe we should start avoiding him altogether. Now, as much as I like Trent Alexander-Arnold, he has just come back from an injury, and I'm a bit concerned about Connor Bradley. He could take at least 1 game in double game week 25, and remember, Liverpool have the Carabao Cup final a few days after double game week 25, so rotation could certainly happen. But one defender I think that can play both games in 25 and also against Burnley at home in 24 is Virgil van Dijk. He might not be the best option in FPL, and he won't get as many attacking contributions as Robertson or Trent do when they start consistently. But what you get from Van Dijk is someone who's steady, who starts pretty much every single game when he's available, and Liverpool have the best chance of a clean sheet in game week 24 against Burnley. So Van Dijk for me is probably the best Liverpool defender to invest in right now. If you have the extra funds and you want to risk it, Trent Alexander-Arnold is always worth it, but it's a difficult situation. For those that don't have Trent, it's probably worth just judging the situation from afar, and you might have to go without him in game week 24 against Burnley. But for those that do have Trent, he's certainly worth holding on to, and I wouldn't sell him, but it's a difficult situation with him, and I do expect Connor Bradley to start one of the next 3 games, and then Liverpool blank in blank game week 26. Now, the 4th defender I'm going for is a bit interesting because you have to be careful about blank game week 26, but you also want to optimize double game week 25. And the way I'm going to do that is by going for one Luton Town defender, and it's none other than Doughty, who has 72 points for the season. I think he's a very good option at 4.5 million and below. Probably my favorite at this moment in time, but you could also consider Branthwaite and maybe some Everton defenders for a bit more in terms of price, like Mikalenko. But Doughty, his attacking threat has been phenomenal in recent months, and he can get the occasional clean sheet here and there. It's Sheffield United at home in game week 24, so I would start him over most defenders this week. In double game week 25, maybe there won't be a clean sheet there for Luton Town, definitely not against Liverpool, but there could be one against Manchester United. Now, you have to say the Red Devils have been good recently, but it all depends because they have been fairly inconsistent over the course of the season. And the only Luton Town player that I'm very interested in is Doughty. Apart from that, there are obviously some suggestions about Barkley. Then you've got Adebayo up front, but Doughty for me is by far the best Luton Town option, and I don't think it's really a contest. The final defender I'm going for, and let's see if he starts against Brentford tonight, that is Kyle Walker. I think is a good option for double game week 25, a decent chance of a clean sheet against Everton at home in 24, and good long-term fixtures. Man City have a tough period around April, but their end to the season is so strong in terms of fixtures, and also the next 5 are still looking very impressive with double game week 25 in mind. They also will feature in blank game week 26 against Bournemouth away. It's very unlikely, almost impossible you could argue, that Man City will feature in the biggest blank game week of the season in 29. The same goes for Brighton, but this team could still prepare you quite well, and you have plenty of free transfers before then to tackle blank game week 29 without using a chip. So this is my defensive 5, quite different to what you usually see on this channel. There's no Pedro Porro, no Trent Alexander-Arnold. I'd still consider them, and from game week 27 onwards, I'd start loading up on Spurs assets, and I still like Pedro Porro or Doggy from that period onwards, and also Richarlison in the midfield. But speaking of which, let's now head over to that position. There's going to be some surprise inclusions in this section, but the midfield is so important in FPL and also in any fantasy format. It wasn't long ago that Saka was in very poor form, but he's got 3 goals in his last 4 Premier League games with 19 FPL points in the last 2 matches, and he's getting back to his best. He's always creating chances and looking dangerous, but in recent weeks he looks a bit sharper, and what I like most is that he's getting into great goal-scoring position, something which I talked about very recently. He hasn't been doing enough this season, and he's kind of more of a creative winger who also holds the width on the right-hand side, but now he's drifting a bit more centrally at times, and that's how he got his goal when Kai Havertz had his shot saved by Alisson. Saka was there at the right place at the right time to tap that in to finish off a great Arsenal move. So Saka is in here, and he's also a very good way of navigating Double Gameweek 25, facing Burnley away. He features against Newcastle in Blank Gameweek 26, a home fixture, and he's very likely to feature in Gameweek 29, the biggest Blank Gameweek of the season. But as I said earlier, it all depends on the Aston Villa versus Chelsea result in the FA Cup fourth round replay. Let's now move on to the other midfielders, and I have to say, I love to include Richarlison, and you can still do it if you really want to have that upside for the next two games, which are home fixtures for Spurs, but I'm going for something a bit different. You can always buy Richarlison back in Gameweek 27, but let me know, would you still include him in this wildcard squad? You certainly can do so. He's the most informed midfielder in FPL, but I'm going to go for Phil Foden. He's got a good fixture in 24, and also over the next 5, Man City are top of the FDR in terms of chance of scoring 2+ goals, according to DraftHound, and they have a double game week in 25 with 2 home fixtures. And whilst De Bruyne will be the more explosive pick, the more exciting one, Foden for me is more nailed on. I'm not going to deny that there are some concerns about him and the positions he's taking on the right-hand side. He's holding the width a bit similar to Saka, but I'd rather have Foden in the centre, just behind the striker, but with Alvarez potentially dropping deeper, with Haaland coming back into the setup, and you've got De Bruyne. Foden could see his minutes also being gradually reduced and also having some occasional benchings. And on top of that, when he does start, he's not going to be as threatening as he usually is. But maybe some returns against Brentford tonight could change our perceptions. I still like Foden, and I prefer him over De Bruyne from a minutes perspective and in terms of value. But I'm not going to deny that the concerns about his positioning and also minutes in the future are certainly there. Now, the third midfielder is Cole Palmer. Now, there is a case to sell Cole Palmer, and if you were ever to do it this season, now is probably the time. But I do like that Crystal Palace fixture. Both Pochettino and Roy Hodgson are on the brink of being sacked, but you'd still favour Chelsea to win that match, or for at least Palmer to produce a massive return. And look, he was on for 2 bonus points against Wolves, despite Chelsea being 4-1 down, and it was only a Thiago Silva late consolation goal that put Palmer down to 1 bonus point. But it goes to show how impressive he is, and he's a bonus points machine. He's getting returns in most games this season. He's fixture proof. There's a lot to like with Cole Palmer, and once again, Chelsea are very likely to feature in Blank Gameweek 29, and that's a key reason why I've kept Cole Palmer in this setup. At his price, I don't really see any midfielder coming close. You could argue Gordon, Douglas Luiz, Bailey, Pedro Neto, Hwang Hee-chan, but I still think Palmer is by far the best option in terms of budget midfielders this season. Now, the fourth midfielder I'm going to go for, this is where things get very interesting indeed, because I just mentioned one of those players, and that's going to be an Aston Villa winger, not Diaby this time, but instead Leon Bailey, going for that budget value. You might just argue, you know what, even though he has a good fixture in Blank Gameweek 26 and also in Gameweek 25, good fixtures for Aston Villa up until Gameweek 30, you'd rather go for Richarlison. I completely understand that, and I think over the next 2, Richarlison is one of the best midfielders to have. But also thinking about Blank Gameweek 26 and ways you can also get to Richarlison later on, I think it might be best to go about him right now if you are playing the wild card. If you have Richarlison, do not sell him. I have to make that very clear, and I still think he's a very good option. And the final midfielder I'm going to go for me, he's the best midfielder to buy for the next 2 game weeks, and that is Diogo Jota. And one thing you could do is buy Jota in right now on the wild card and then sell him to Richarlison in Game Week 27. That's something you could do, and maybe go for a 1-week punt in Game Week 26, as I'll show you very soon, such as Hwang Hee-chan, Pedro Neto, or you could just go for Wolves assets like Cunha up front. But this is a very solid midfield 5. You've got diversity. You're covering 5 of the best teams in the country. Maybe not Chelsea, but the other 4 certainly are very good attacking propositions, and Palmer is still one of the best FPL assets in the game. So I think it's a very good way of covering the midfield. But Richarlison could be a huge absentee, and if you think that's just really not enough, you want to go for him and you're prepared to take hits or just use extra transfers in Blank Gameweek 26, so be it. Go for Richarlison. He's a fantastic option for the next 2 game weeks. Ollie Watkins has been one of the most consistent FPL assets over the course of the season, with 11 goals and 14 FPL assists. What more can you say about him? There's a reason why he's got the most points of any FPL forward. You still think Erling Haaland's the best forward in the game, of course, over the course of the season, but up until now, it has been Watkins. He's been staying injury-free. That's a key asset that he has as well. He's always available. He's not on penalties. That's the only downside to him, but he is just massively overperforming as well, you have to say, in terms of the assists. I think his XA, the expected assists, is around 3, but he's got 14 FPL assists for the season, which is ridiculous. Having said that, though, Aston Villa have some quality players, and it's not a huge surprise to see Watkins doing so well this season. Now, the second forward I'm going for isn't going to be Solanke this time, but I'm going to go for a forward who's got the most fixtures available up until Game Week 29, and that's Ivan Toney. And not only does he feature in Game Week 29, but his fixture is against Burnley, and he also features in Game Week 26, another blank game week, and he has a double in Game Week 25. The only downside to that is that it's Liverpool and Man City, the two toughest teams in the league right now. But Ivan Toney has got 18 points since his return from that 9-month suspension. But for me, Ivan Toney last season was the second best forward in FPL. This time round, you've got Watkins kind of taking his spot, but Toney is still right up there. And whilst I still like Solanke and Bournemouth could double in Game Week 27 or 28, if you can afford it, Ivan Toney is worth the extra millions. And also, from Game Week 33 until the end of the season, Brentford have great fixtures in terms of quality. So there's a mixture here in terms of quantity now up until Game Week 29 for Brentford and the amount of games they have to play. And then to wrap up the season, they've got some very good games on paper where they can win, and Ivan Toney can get many bonus points and goal contributions. The final forward speaks for himself. I would argue he is essential over the next couple of weeks with the likes of Salah still returning from injury, and he's not a guarantee to start in both games in double game week 25 with the impending Carabao Cup final. And not only that, you've got Heung-min Son unavailable due to the Asian Cup and also blanking in game week 26. So the lack of premium alternatives makes this player almost essential and a necessity over this upcoming period, and that's going to be none other than Erling Haaland. And I think he's triple captain territory in double game week 25. It could be the best triple captain opportunity we get on paper all season. And this 50-man squad speaks for itself. You've got 3 Man City and you cover double game week 25 that way. I'll be showing you with FPL.team how this team would line up in terms of game week 24, and also briefly discussing double game week 25 and blank game week 26, where you can make further adjustments to also optimize double game week 25, have more doublers, and also in blank game week 26 you can make that squad even better and have some of the best options for that week specifically. And then afterwards, from game week 27 onwards, you can buy some Spurs players and go for 2 or 3, with Richarlison and Heung-min Son being the clear standouts. And then on top of that, you've got Maddison, Pedro Porro and Udogie. So there's a lot you can do with this wildcard squad. It's very flexible. So let's now head over to FPL.team and talk about the starting lineup. I would go for Dubravka in goal, but quite reluctantly, given how poor Newcastle have been defensively this season. And you could argue that Trippier is the only defensive coverage worth going for from the tune. But Areola is facing Arsenal at home, and despite his heroics at the Emirates, you would expect Arsenal to win this game, or at least to score some goals. And West Ham are really struggling for form. They've got no victories in this calendar year so far. The back three will be Doughty, Virgil van Dijk and Walker. The midfield will be Saka, Foden, Palmer and Diogo Jota. And the front three speaks for itself: Haaland, Watkins and Toney. And the bench will be Areola, Bailey, Gabriel and Estupiñán. The expected points is quite high. Now, this is another reason why I didn't go for Richarlison. Let's say we do go for him instead of Bailey. You would have a major benching headache on your hands. Who would you bench to start Richarlison, who almost certainly would have to in Game Weeks 24 and 25? Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. Like I said, if you want to go for Richarlison, go for it. Don't let me stop you. He went up in price overnight, and if I could, I would buy him right now, even with blank game week 26 in mind. But Diogo Jota for me is a clear standout with the double in 25 for Liverpool. And also with Richarlison, I'm mainly looking at game week 27 to buy Spurs assets, including himself, or maybe instead I'll go for Heung-min Son. Now, if we look at double game week 25, this would look very solid indeed. You've got multiple doublers. The entire back three is full of doublers. You've also got 2 midfielders here in Foden and Diogo Jota, and 2 forwards. And you can add more to your liking, whether on the wildcard in game week 24 or with a free transfer in game week 25, maybe even a hit if you're up for it. But the bench would be Areola, Palmer, Gabriel and Estupiñán. You could arguably put the defenders above Palmer in the rankings. But Dubravka at home to Bournemouth, then you've got that back three. I know Doughty might not get a clean sheet there, but an attack and return is certainly possible. And then you've got the likes of Saka and Bailey as single game week players who face the likes of Burnley and Fulham away. The same goes for Ollie Watkins up top. Erling Haaland will be the standout captaincy option. You could even bench boost this team, but I think with this squad on the wild card, I would use the triple captaincy on Erling Haaland. But let's see if he starts tonight against Brentford, and also what happens in Game Week 24 against Everton. And to be honest, I think Jota over Haaland for the captaincy in Game Week 24 could be a shout, but for double Game Week 25, I'd still give the edge to the likes of Erling Haaland and De Bruyne if you go for him. Now for Blank Game Week 26, you've got an entire starting 11 by just using one free transfer, and you've still got another one available with these proposed transfer plans and also the wildcard squad from Game Week 24, and that's buying Hwang Hee-chan for Diogo Jota. So let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. If you were to go for a Richarlison as well, then you would need to use both free transfers in Blank Game Week 26. And if you are looking to make other transfers as well along the way, then it could incur a -4 hit. But that's certainly not too bad. But I think one benefit of wildcarding right now would be to navigate these upcoming blanks and doubles without using too many hits compared to those that will be doing so. I think this is a very solid plan for all of you, and you're also quite well set up for Blank Game Week 29 in either scenario, whether Aston Villa will feature or if it's going to be Chelsea instead, and the same goes for Arsenal or West Ham. Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below, and thank you very much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it or found it useful, then be sure to smash the like button and subscribe if you're new. Let's try to get this video to the 200 likes, and let's keep on pushing towards 23k subscribers and beyond. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram, DylanRCM, and check all the links in the description below for the Patreon, Championships Discord server, the FPL League, and Draft Town. Be sure to check all of them out. I wish you all the best of luck for Game Week 23, 24, and the rest of the season. And I'll see you next time.